Hey, how's it going? Welcome to another Digitally Overwhelmed podcast episode. My name is Cynthia, and I help therapists and counselors get found in Google, grow their business, and heal more of the world. This is episode 224 of the podcast, and today we're going to be talking about what it means to have a digital marketing plan for your therapist or counseling business. And this topic isn't something I've talked about a lot. I am an SEO expert, a search marketing expert, but I am really excited to kind of introduce a more holistic approach, a broader approach, because especially when it comes to SEO, it's not just about your website. Yes, your website is where a lot of the work and the changes happen, but it's more about building that online presence and having your marketing ecosystem, your digital marketing plan align with everything else you're doing in your business. Can just change the results you see, can change how you grow your business, and it can also change how it feels to just show up online and how people find you and that sort of thing. So I love this topic. And I'm excited to get into it today. So first of all, let's talk about what it means to have a digital marketing plan. Like, digital marketing feels like such a beast of a term. And to me, it's just really about, like I said, what is your online presence and how are people finding you? Because there are people searching for you, especially around mental health. We know that in the last few years, the whole industry has completely changed how people are searching, what they expect, like the level of knowledge and expertise that they expect is much higher. And Google's standards have also gone up quite a bit. So if you are passionate about what you do, just showing up in Google and helping more people and showing your expertise, your level of, whatever license you have, is going to help in many, many areas of your business. And so what I'm hoping to share with you in this episode are just like different things to consider when choosing platforms, when working with platforms, and how, so digital platforms, right? Like social media, newsletter, website, and also how each of those platforms work together, work in tandem. So we don't want them to be isolated. We don't want them to just be kind of disconnected, because you're not going to get the best results. That's the reality. And more than ever, there are people just searching for mental health terms online. Again, like I mentioned already, our phones are just this amazing tool. They're basically a computer, and we've all had that experience of something troubling us in the middle of the night, or, just wanting to take action on an area of our life. And mental health is so personal, it's so intimate. There's still just not a lot of information out there about how to take ownership of your website, of your mental health. I actually believe that we're just starting to scratch the surface in terms of the content that's out there. So there's just this amazing opportunity for therapists and counselors to show their knowledge and to give people tools to understand their brains, understand their minds, and make their lives better. And then for some of those people, they're looking for support, right? They're looking for a therapist or a counselor, a psychotherapist, a psychologist to help them in their life, on the journey, whatever they're going through. Whether it's anxiety, OCD, divorce. There's just so many things that happen in our life, and just having that neutral ear can be such a comfort. And I'm actually planning on doing an episode a little bit about my own mental health journey, because it's just something that has really defined why I'm passionate about this niche. In episode 221, I talk about why I like helping therapists and counselors, but I'm actually going to do a whole other episode on, my own mental health and why, how I've invested over the years and how it's changed my life, and why this SEO work is important to me, specifically for mental health and for therapists and counselors. Again, I feel like it's so untapped, but it's such a big opportunity, and I'm just so excited. Okay, but let's dive into this digital marketing plan. So I'm going to be giving you a couple different, like I said, platforms, things to consider for each one. And what I'm hoping for you to do is just kind of do a check with your own business of what you have going on, what you feel confident in, what are the things you don't feel confident in, and hopefully walk away with some actions, with some inspiration to just today make a change, start pivoting things, or to create that website for the first time or whatever, right? So it's important to remember that there's a lot you can do. And my intention, especially with this podcast, is not to overwhelm you, right? That's why it's called Digitally Overwhelmed. I don't want you to feel like you have to do it all at once, but I do want to give you kind of like a high level view so that you can consider where are your priorities, where are the areas you feel like you could get more traction, and again, how could you take action today? All right, so the first platform that we're going to talk about when it comes to your digital marketing plan is, you guessed it, your website. This is your online home. This is your world, your universe. And it's just so powerful, especially with search marketing, but really any type of marketing and just wanting to get found online. People want to get to know you. They want to be invited into that online home and to get a taste of what it's like to work with you. So there's so many different ways that we can transmit that vibe of working with us through our websites, through our visuals, through our copy. And it's important to, again, this isn't about overcomplicating it. There's lots of platforms that allow you to create a website fairly quickly. If you do have the resources, working with a designer, working with a web developer or an SEO expert is great. But if you are just starting, just getting a website up, it doesn't have to be super complicated, and keeping it simple, right? And what's more important is that intentionality of like, how do I want people to feel? What information do I want to start to transmit? And how do I want to just make it easy for someone to book a session with me to, work with me? So it is a little bit about the strategy, but it's also about taking that action. And then if you have a website, putting in these checkpoints so that you're not abandoning your online home. You are consistently looking at, what keywords are you ranking in Google right now? What pages could be improved? How can you be refreshing your content? How are you creating a blogging routine that is consistent? And if you work with a team, how are you inspiring your team to blog regularly and stay on top of topics regularly? This is something we actually help our clients with. For the clients who do want to do their own blog writing, we send them keywords. We tell them, what topics people are searching. And so we help them with that part of the process where it could feel like I have no idea what to write about, or I have no idea how to connect my keywords to leads reaching out to me online. And so that's a big part of our work. And I just love doing this for clients because it takes that load off of having to learn keyword research, of having to figure out volume competition. I mean, if you want to learn that stuff, that's great. I actually have a whole course on how to do your own keyword research. But for a lot of people, it's like, I just want to be able to see my clients. I like writing. I want to spend some time each month just writing a few blog posts and getting it out of the way, and then just doing my work. So if that's you, definitely check out my SEO discovery call. You can go to digitalbloomiq.com/discovery. There's also a link in the show notes. And so that's kind of the first step to getting awareness around your rankings, your potential for rankings, and also what you should be focusing on next. Like I'm going to be covering in the rest of this episode, there's a lot of things that can happen when it comes to your digital marketing, but being able to prioritize and focus on the right next step is going to change the results you see. because the reality is there's always something you could be working on, but the question is like what is going to move the needle for you, and what is going to connect you to your goals for this year, for the next few years. Especially with search marketing, it is a long-term game, but what you do now can have just like a huge impact on your business future. So again, your website is your online universe. And so some elements to consider when it comes to your digital marketing plan, like I already mentioned, is your SEO. So looking at your keywords, looking at your site experience, looking at how you are just making it easy for people to book that time with you, to give you money, to start working with you. So that's really important. And I recommend that you just keep it simple, whatever stage you're at. Just overcomplicating the website can, sometimes people just want the super unique site experience, and it's kind of like building a house and putting the bathroom kind of as the first room you walk in. And yes, that's unique, but do our house guests find that helpful? No, like no one wants to walk into a house into a bathroom. So keep that in mind with your website. And that's why I come back to, working with someone in many cases can be helpful, because they can help you keep it simple. And there's a lot of data and just like best practices that you might not be aware of as a business owner that just ensure success with your website. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, and there's ways to show uniqueness and ways to show off your brand vibe without having the bathroom in the hallway situation. And so that's a big part of having a digital presence, is knowing what your audience expects and like how to make that experience, that website experience, easy, fun. And yeah, depending on your brand vibe, right? It might not be fun, but just whatever you want to transmit. And next up, and this is kind of like an extension of your website, is your digital content. So here I'm talking about blog posts, podcast episodes, if you have a podcast, emails. So all those things help show off what your knowledge is, your team's knowledge, your team's expertise. And this is especially important for SEO, but really for all marketing. More and more with Google is getting very strict about who they shows up for medical topics and medical terms. And mental health is a medical industry. So if someone is searching something that will impact their body and their life, Google's going to make sure that they are featuring someone who is trained and authorized to talk about that. And in the SEO community, we talk a lot about EAT, which stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And so creating content where we are showing off and we're saying, hey, I'm licensed to talk about this, is going to change completely not just how people view you, but how you rank as well. So when it comes to content, it's not necessarily about doing it all, right? So for some of you, having a podcast, like I have a podcast, I love my podcast, but maybe for some of you, talking is just not your thing. You prefer to type and write. Maybe for some of you, social media is not your thing, and you just prefer to, again, focus on your blog. And all combinations are okay. Like there's no right or wrong. But what I will say is that it's important to be clear on your goals, be clear on the time you have, like your time dedication and consistency, right? So there's a lot of talk about what is consistency. Does it mean I should be blogging weekly? Does this mean I should be blogging monthly? And what I like to invite my clients to look at is consistency is what you make it, right? So if you are doing like a monthly newsletter, how is your audience interpreting that? Is that helpful to them? There's nothing right or wrong about doing either like a daily newsletter or a monthly newsletter. It's like it all goes, but it gets to work for you and your brand. And it also just gets to be something that's sustainable. So to me, consistency is more about asking, what do I want to do? What bandwidth do I have? Do I have bandwidth to write these social media posts, or do I want to hire it out? Looking at other resources as well. But what's like the bandwidth? What are my resources? What is my budget? And then based on that, you can start to decide, okay, this is what I want to invest in. And there's no shame, like there's nothing wrong with that. And the other kind of benefit of approaching it in this way of, what can I handle right now? What can my team handle? Is that if you put a goal for the next 3 months with that plan, you can measure results. So you can say, okay, if I send out one newsletter each month for the next 3 months, I want to look at what was the return on that newsletter. What did it bring me in my business? And so just being honest about your goals, and that's going to just bring more clarity. It's going to feel like just easier instead of, again, feeling like you have to do something or someone saying to you, well, you have to write a newsletter each week. I feel like that approach it doesn't really resonate, right? And that comes off in your marketing when you feel like you should be doing something. So again, find a content plan that works for you and find a medium that works for you. So this can be, again, video, it could be audio, it could be a combination of these things. And if you're starting out, again, it's okay to experiment, or if you feel like your current marketing channels aren't doing it for you, try a new one. My only recommendation is just to be clear on your expectations with that, and more isn't better. Definitely, it's more about finding that sweet spot of quality with the quantity that you're able to put out, and that resonates with your brand. All right, next let's talk about the big one, the social channels. So here we're talking about Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. All these platforms are absolutely great for your digital marketing plan. And my recommendation is very much similar to the content. It's not necessarily about just being super aggressive on all of them. I do recommend that you register just at least to have your handle on all these platforms, just to have it in case someone else doesn't use it. But I would say just focus on the one that really lights you up to start, and then down the line you can look at hiring some things out, maybe repurposing some things across different platforms. And yes, it does make a difference if you do publish in more places. You're just casting a wider net. But again, there's kind of like the sweet spot, because if you do this without thinking about it, you just like copy and paste things, it can rub sometimes in some channels the wrong way, since each platform has its own way of being used, right? So if we look at something like Twitter, the audience on Twitter is very different than the audience on Instagram. And so it's important to consider, how are you leveraging each of these platforms in the way it's meant to be leveraged? And so that takes time to analyze that of like your brand. And so many times you do need some help in looking at, how am I taking maybe my Facebook posts and I'm turning them into tweets, and what does that look like exactly? So again, it's not just about blindly blasting across all your channels. It needs to be thought out. And this is also a great time to look at and ask yourself, is my audience on Twitter? Is my audience on Facebook? Is my audience on TikTok or Instagram or whatever? And so asking those questions can also help you get some clarity. It's normal to experiment. Like, all these things are evolving all the time. And so it's not going to be a fixed thing, but I do recommend, every 3 to 6 months, taking a look at your platforms, looking at the return on the investment for each one, and really considering, is this helping my business grow? Is it helping me reach my goals that I have? And again, sometimes it's about simplifying. I've seen a lot of businesses do really well actually having fewer platforms that are more focused and tuned in. And then some businesses are just really good at being on all of them and customizing that content. So there's so many combinations, and I know that makes it confusing, because I know some of you just want like one-stop solution. But I think it's more about like starting slowly and then building on top of that. So one thing at a time. And then if you are in like a transition where you have all these platforms, but you're not sure what's working, just maybe focusing on your strategy one platform at a time and kind of like going in a circular motion and really looking at that return on investment and looking at your audience. And that can help you make some really clear decisions around which platforms you want to be focusing on in terms of social channels. And I want to pause here and talk about a great tool that you can use to analyze, what the return is for social channels, and that's Google Analytics. So if you don't have Google Analytics set up, highly recommend that you get that set up sooner rather than later. That's going to give you some solid data to look at where your traffic is coming from and what your traffic is doing. So you can actually look at things like, are they signing up for my email newsletter? Are they purchasing, one of my online courses, or are they signing up for an opt-in or to schedule a session with me? And so Google Analytics allows us to get that ROI, that return on investment, and you can see specifically which channels are more effective. Just because a channel isn't bringing a specific amount of conversions, so one of those events I just mentioned, doesn't necessarily mean it's performing badly, but it does help us get some clarity of like, what are your like heavy hitter channels that are getting people to take action, and then what are maybe the channels that are helping you bring in new customers who are getting to know you and they're not ready to like do anything yet, but they're in your universe now, they're on your email list and that sort of thing. So it's good to remember that not all social channels will perform in the same way, and that's totally okay. We get to be honest with ourselves about that, and we get to kind of have a balance of the platforms that are bringing in new clients and the platforms that are bringing in our returning customers or getting customers to do that final step to convert. And then even longer term, like our loyalty customers that are staying in our universe that have already bought things, how are we engaging them as well? Because that can bring other types of businesses. So see how each channel has different purpose. And I think that's what makes it really fun and exciting as well. All right, so we've talked about your website, we've talked about your content, we've talked about social channels. Now let's talk about referrals. So first, I want to talk about your professional network. So these are colleagues and just other kind of coworkers, people who are other therapists, other counselors. And so maybe for some of you, you're like, well, how is that a marketing channel? But this is just so great for SEO and for marketing because, specifically with SEO, if we have other businesses that are referencing our business, that creates a backlink, and that will really speed up our ranking results, because having other websites reference our websites, other professional websites that are in our field and industry reference our website, can change how Google sees our websites, and it can change obviously the traffic coming from those other websites to our website. So if we have another colleague who doesn't specialize exactly with what we do and they write something about us, or we write a guest post on their blog and link it back to our website, that can be a way to generate leads, obviously. And that's part of digital marketing. So sometimes this is about going to conferences and being a speaker, or sometimes this is about being featured on industry podcast episodes, again, that you're not the owner of, but you're being featured as the guest expert. And so building your professional network and looking for opportunities to be featured, to collaborate. Sometimes you can do like a joint offering with someone, or sometimes you can just like put together your own audience and generate a network that way. Just even reaching out to people and interviewing them, although that doesn't necessarily generate the backlink right away, just builds that network. So you want to be thinking about other professionals who are at the level that you are at, that can both send you that traffic as well as just offline referrals. And then the other type of referrals that I think is interesting are what I call partner businesses. So these aren't colleagues who are necessarily therapists or counselors, but they're other business types that your audience is following that can also create some really interesting collaborations. So in terms of therapists and counselors here, specifically talking about maybe an acupuncturist or a chiropractor, a yoga instructor, a breathing coach, mindset coach. All these businesses aren't direct competition, but we know that a lot of people, when they're looking at mental health, they're not just going to therapy, they're also doing yoga, they're also practicing their breathing. Maybe they're doing journaling and you're helping them with that. So what other businesses can you work with to share audiences, to tap into new audiences that aren't direct competition? And this is similar to the professional network, but I think it's even more exciting because you're tapping into like a whole new world. And there's some really big audiences out there. So again, could you be pitching to be on a podcast that talks about breathing and talk about breathing and anxiety? Could you be reaching out to a yoga instructor and asking them if they want to, do a training about mental health and yoga, for example? So there's so many opportunities there. And I think it's about finding the things that light you up and the things that really connect with what you specialize in. And that's also just going to have great benefits for your SEO, for all your digital marketing. Getting featured just sends great signals to Google, and it just shows your audience as well that you have expertise, that you being featured in different places, just shows off what you do and how you help your clients. Okay, so let's recap. So we have our website, we have our online home, and we have our content that's part of our online home, but also, creates this opportunity to generate a relationship, to change people's lives right away. Even if they don't end up hiring us, it just creates a resource that then gets shared, and that creates a ripple effect. Then we have our social media channels that are really great, really important. Finding the right ones and fine tuning, playing around. And sometimes that does require hiring specialists in each platform to understand how to use it in your advantage. And then we have our referrals. We have our professional referrals that are so important. And we also have our partner businesses that aren't therapists or counselors, but they're other niche businesses that are helping our clients as well. And they allow us to kind of branch out and find new audiences that we've never talked to before, that have never seen us, that can also, really help to grow our business. So what's next? Maybe you have like all this information, hopefully got some ideas bouncing around your head. So I recommend taking action today, sitting down and just either not spending too much time planning, to be honest, but go ahead and just take action on one area of your business. So maybe it's your website and you want to go to your homepage and check that the book your consultation button works correctly, and maybe make some tweaks to your about page. Go and do that today. Maybe it's your social media. Maybe you've been wanting to get on Instagram, or you're just not feeling confident about how you're showing up on Twitter. Go on there and just start to look at what you want to action, what you want to get to. Find other accounts that are doing the things you want to do and start to analyze like what is working here. And again, it's never going to be perfect. I think this is a process, and it's about finding your way of making it work. So experimentation is a big part of the work I do. And I think that there's controlled experimentation that can be really insightful, where we're using a certain amount of time in controlled space to see if what we're doing is working. And then if it's not, we pivot and we change and we figure that out. So I want you to take action today, even if it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, it all counts, and just start getting that momentum, because again, the sooner you invest in doing this conscious kind of digital marketing plan, the sooner you're going to see results. And it's not about doing it all at once, but instead making these small tweaks and seeing those shifts happen over time. So I hope that you found that helpful. I would love to hear more about your own digital marketing plan. You can leave me comments here in this episode, And if you're looking to get a little bit of an outside perspective on your digital marketing, specifically on your search marketing, how you're showing up in Google, how your website is showing up in Google, I am currently offering some limited SEO discovery calls. So this is a no charge call where we get on the phone. I pull some reporting, I pull some data, and we look at, where are you ranking in today? What is your potential to rank? And what should you be focusing on next from my and my team's point of view, of course. And so this is just your space to ask questions as well, to get a sense of where you're at. I think awareness is many times the most powerful step, and it's like half the journey, just understanding where we're at right now. And I just love doing these calls because I get to know all sorts of therapists and counselors who are working on their online presence and just doing amazing work. So you can get started with the process by going to my website, digitalbloomiq.com/discovery. There you're gonna fill out a form with some questions. And if all is well, we'll move on to sending you the calendar. We don't work with everybody because depending on where you're at in your business, we might recommend different things. But the idea is that we'll get on the phone, we'll talk about your presence, your website, your potential to rank, and hopefully give you some ideas to move forward. All right, my friends, I love this topic. I hope that you do too. And we'll catch you next week on the Digitally Overwhelmed podcast. Bye.